Thank you for joining our small group studies. We're going to be talking today about Abraham and his covenant with God. We're joined today by Chad McAllister, who is, of course, one of our elders, and also we're joined by Ken Lung, who's another one of our elders and also our administrative assistant here. So, Chad, would you start reading in Genesis chapter 12? Just go ahead and cover that first paragraph.
Sure. Starting in verse 1. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go forth from your country and from your relatives and from your father's house to the land which I will show you, and I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great. And so you shall be a blessing, and I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth will be blessed."
Well, probably the first thing to talk about is the nature of these promises that God gives to Abraham, and whether or not there's any connection between those promises and the relationship that God's entering into with Abraham. One of the things that I often encounter when I'm talking to people is that there seems to be this idea that God has almost like a bag of rewards or punishments. There's kind of a Santa Claus mentality of God is going to pull out of this bag either a piece of coal, a punishment for you, or a reward, and that they're kind of arbitrary. I guess I shouldn't be surprised by this, because people, I think, look at the nature of God's commandments to his people, and a lot of them look at those rules as arbitrary. It's almost like God just, that the things God does really are kind of like the things that people do. There's a certain amount of just the way that I feel at the moment. Capriciousness involved in it. So what do you think about the nature of the promises that God gives here and how they relate to a relationship with him?
I might compare it, say, to maybe my relationship to a child, one of my own children. Obviously, I want them to be blessed and things of a sort. And there's a sense in which I want to, provide for them and make provision for their future. But at the same time, if I don't instill certain character traits in them and stuff like that, it's not going to happen. And I think, going into that, God has this great destiny for Abram. But if Abraham's not the right person to receive that blessing, that provision's not going to matter. And so, part of this covenant that's being entered into, there's a part for Abraham and Israel, through that to carry out, if you will.
Mm-hmm. So you had mentioned, children and the nature of that. Does the blessing that your children receive from their relationship with you, is that arbitrary?
No, it's definitely not arbitrary.
Okay.
One, obviously there are specific things that might be unique or something, but I'm going to raise my kids to be honest. Right. And there's something about, being honest that allows you to, act in such a way that comports with reality and provides good outcomes.
Right. And so here's what I find very enlightening as far as understanding our relationship with God. And it's funny to me that it takes so long in life to figure this out. But this picture of kind of almost a capricious reward system or a capricious set of rules would you guys say that's pretty widespread in people in the world, and even sometimes Christians, that they kind of have this view of, God will just dispense whatever he kind of feels like in the moment?
It's certainly an easier one to ascribe. I mean, to believe in. I think it doesn't require any thought or
and
consideration.
There's probably sometimes some comfort in that. It's because there's an element of relief of responsibility on us. If God just hands these out willy-nilly, then and also sometimes our view of other people is in where they stand in relationship to us versus their blessings. That person just got a raise, a big promotion, whatever. Well, God, it's kind of, it's just the way things are. There's no relationship
He didn't
between.
deserve it.
Right,
He just got
exactly,
it.
exactly. When somebody gets the promotion over us, it's easier for our egos to not pin this on any kind of justice, let's say. But the thing that often eludes us, I think, with relationships to God is neither side of this is arbitrary. So and what I mean by that is neither side of the relationship with God is arbitrary. So we've talked a lot over the years about the fact that the Ten Commandments have to do with the character and nature of God.
Sure.
So his requirements of us have everything to do with who he is, his nature and character. And in fact, we started off this series in creation talking about the fact that there's a pattern to God. And in fact, that's not the fact that there's a pattern to God, there's a rationality to God, there's order there. Yeah. That is not opposed to his personhood. That's actually in line with personhood. Your kids, if you were, either one of you, if you guys were random, that would not impress upon your children the idea of personhood, sure. Right? If all your actions were completely random, there really is something with this idea of order and rationality, and that has to do with being a person and having a will. Well, God's then his expectations of our relationships with him have everything to do with the pattern of his existence, with the will to be a certain type of person. God desires, God is honest, like you'd mentioned with your kids. And so you desire honesty from your kids because you're honest. Well, God is no different than that. God is honest, and so he tells us that we are not to lie in his 10 Commandments. The desire for, or the expectations of our side of that relationship, of how we're to behave toward God, are set by his character and nature. One thing that we don't often think about, though, is that the other side of that relationship is also set by his character and nature. So not only the things that he expects from us, but the things that he gives to us are set by his character and nature. They're not arbitrary. Yeah. God doesn't just have a big bag of rewards, like Santa Claus, and he just pulls one out based on what you like or what you want or what he happens to have at the moment, what the elves made up in heaven. That's not how he does it. It has everything to do with who he is. And so if your expectation of your children is that they interact with you honestly, what's their reward from you? What's the other side? What's the blessing that they receive from you? It's honesty, right? And that seems fairly mundane, but only if you're a little bit foolish, right? And I'm saying that as someone who regularly engages in no small amount of foolishness, but we're very, very foolish and short-sighted if we don't understand the blessing that honesty from God gives us. I just think about the Greek gods and what it would be like to live in that kind of a world. Yeah. How do you function if that's the nature of reality?
Yeah, and fear.
And lots of anxiety.
Yeah, anxiety.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't really be much different than being an insane person. If you're insane, you cannot trust the what your senses are telling you. You're having hallucinations. You can't trust what your senses are telling you, and you can't trust the products of your mind, your rationality. Those two things are no longer trustworthy. Well, there's really no difference between that and a God who's created everything, who's not being honest with you. Sure. So knowing that, if we look at the specific promises here that God makes, what do we make of that in terms of the nature and character of God? So let's enumerate what those promises are.
Great nation. your name will be great, and you will be a blessing, and I'll bless those who bless you, and curse those who curse you.
Okay, so the first thing is, and it's not necessarily, it's implicit here, if not explicit, is that there's family involved, right? If he can't become a great nation until
He becomes a family.
he becomes there's that has to take place, and we're dealing with a guy here who's an old man, who's not at the age where he's going to be, having a family. And so what does that tell us about the nature of God and the character of God and kind of the product of a relationship with God if one of the things he promises is family? Because I think that for a lot of people they'd go, oh yeah, family.
Yeah.
So first of all, what does God mean by family? Does he mean just people who are biologically related to you?
No, I think that's part of it. But
Right.
community, right? The community
Right.
around you.
Right. So when God talks about life, we might live a certain existence and we call that life. But that's not necessarily what God means by life. Jesus came to give us life to the full.
Right.
That's not the kind of life that we normally live. So the problem that we run into is when we see things like God says we're going to have a family, we go, oh yeah, I know what that is. But do we? That's I don't think that we understand by that word what God means to communicate to us. So what does he mean when family is part of the promise?
I think the people that are around you that are responsible to and for you, there's a give and take. I think of our church and all the people that attend here, that consistently have become a part of FCCT. That's the first one that comes. It might be the church in general, across the globe, missionaries that we support. Those are the things I think of.
It's funny because there's something about family that is often associated like somebody who's going to have your back no matter what, and there can be a closeness that just it's like unbreakable, if you will. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes that unbreakable closeness manifests itself as a real blessing, and sometimes it manifests itself as something other than that. I was watching a psychologist talk about, there's a documentary called Crumb. Have you guys seen this? It's about a guy who he's a cartoonist, real big.
From the 60s?
From like the 60s and 70s, yeah. He was kind of part of the hippie movement, although he wasn't really a hippie.
Transgressive
exactly.
Kind of artwork.
Yeah, very
mentality.
transgressive, and obviously I wouldn't recommend going out and buying an anthology of his work because it's not what you would want to have.
Crude.
But it's very crude.
Yeah.
But in the documentary, it actually gets into, you see a lot of the family dynamic, and he talks about his father as really being disappointed in his three sons because his mother was she was the devouring mother of kind of the archetypal devouring mother. She smothered her sons with her love, and so what came from that is the father was kind of distant because he could see that things were going poorly, and even Crumb could see that this wasn't healthy and that his dad was reacting to it, but still chose his mother and the closeness with his brothers over what his dad was trying to do. But in the end, what you had was a guy that was homeless and went to prison, another guy who about 6 months after the documentary was finished drank furniture polish to kill himself. And then the third guy, Crumb, whose life was really nothing short of a complete disaster. Now, they were all really close, but that closeness was not something that was a blessing. I think that, again, this closeness that you're talking about is a great thing under certain circumstances, a terrible thing under others. And really what God's getting at in family here is that God's character and nature is such that his expectations from you have a certain pattern to them. and what he will give to you has a certain pattern. And the byproduct of a relationship where that's going on is that you're transformed into something that, if you then carry that in, that same exchange, if you carry the pattern of that exchange into the relationships that are closest to you, that's how family develops. That's how true family, that's how God's view of family develops. And so again, we look at Abraham entering into this covenant with God, and we think, oh, he's a covenant God, and oh, here's the promises for him. But we don't understand that it's really dependent upon him manifesting what it means to have a relationship with God. That doesn't mean you just act however you want to and then ask God to help you out of whatever problems arise from the way that you're acting, which oftentimes is too often how Christians will view this.